Chapter 13, Explanatory Universality, Hangups, and Sexuality. Lower down on the spectrum of things that can go wrong with a mind are so-called hang-ups. These might not rise to the level of depression or general anxiety, and certainly nothing like hallucinations, but rather they may be things like minor phobias or excessive shyness or fear of having a go, or becoming distracted and then becoming frustrated because of being distracted and so on. So consider, if one is excessively shy as a young person trying to date or find friends, one may well be advised, try going to a pub and drinking beer. Indeed, for many people they will find that drinking alcohol is curative for shyness. But it can also be habit-forming as one begins to think, wrongly, that the only possible way they can approach someone else is by downing a couple of pints of beer and a shot of tequila. That is a recipe for poor health, physical and mental, over time. The universal mind would be better deployed in simply avoiding the alcohol and attempting to talk to someone new. Expect to fail, of course. So don't worry if or when that happens. But celebrate when success arrives, because if you're completely sober, you may remember exactly where the interaction went well and where it didn't, and so correct, conjecture, and try again. Iterate and explain. In many places, therefore, where swallow this substance to change your psychology is suggested, an approach without the substance might well be better. Okay, fair enough. If after 100 trials of shyly blushing and stuttering one's way through a conversation, even after getting advice from a friend or elsewhere, has resulted in nothing but terrible discomfort, then sure, have a beer. We need not be Victorian about this because enough people are presently arguing for a return to a kind of Victorian-era style prudishness. We have found that in many places where a strange marriage of, on the one hand, a prudish rejection of traditional gender roles, where a man would ask a woman to coffee or to dinner and be hauled into the human resource office of their company under a charge of sexual impropriety, while at the same time, and at the same company, the LGBTQIA2+ rainbow flag is flown prominently, and people asked to bring their authentic selves to work by wearing sexually provocative or particularly revealing clothing. This part of culture is a mess of contradictions. Is the workplace a place where sexual relationships are encouraged or not? So, on the one hand, the traditional means of courtship are being regarded as being across the line. Never approach a workmate for a date for fear of falling afoul of some woke policy. And it need not just be in the workplace, where countless relationships do begin. But even in more public places, men complain women call them creeps, or worse, if they dare approach. While on the other hand, displaying a flag at your desk that indicates you are, for example, a demisexual furry while wearing shorts that reveal part of your buttocks and a top that reveals most of your breasts is regarded as the epitome of a well-adjusted person in the modern corporate age. We are confused as a culture about sexuality now, where Victorian-era prudishness is coupled with the most postmodernist view of what the average person actually wants. Now, it is true that sexuality is on a spectrum, even if the majority of people say they are attracted solely to people of the opposite sex, although surveys these days suggest young people very frequently label themselves as something other than heterosexual. What the universality of the human mind teaches us on this subject is people can take on any sexuality and can change sexuality. It may not be common or easy, but that it can happen is required by explanatory universality. Now you may think, I cannot possibly imagine being homosexual, or heterosexual, or bisexual, or asexual. But as I like to say anytime something like that is said, your inability to imagine a thing is not a refutation of it. Some of our ideas are deeply ingrained, and we often have no interest in changing them. But that they are indeed ideas is irrefutable. And ideas can always change. The mind runs on the brain. It can cause the release of neurotransmitters and hormones, and those give us sensations, pleasurable or painful, or some blend of both. A majority of people have no great love for standing on high places, much less jumping from them. A person with a fear of heights may well say, I cannot imagine jumping off a cliff with nothing but a parachute to slow my fall. That sounds like the very definition of terror and hell to me. Okay, so that is an idea, and the idea gives rise to visceral sensations in the body. A racing heart, vertigo, legs going weak beneath them as if their very conscious mind is no longer in control of their body. All sorts of awful sensations difficult to describe except to say it's extremely unpleasant when they think of approaching a cliff, much less jumping off one. They have no reason to want to change their mind to become like someone who routinely engages in base jumping and finds nothing more exciting than jumping off cliffs. Now, neither of those two people, as far apart on the spectrum as possible when it comes to jumping from cliffs, was born that way. Babies are not afraid of cliffs. It must be learned. Look that up if you do not think I already have. This is well known among psychologists who have studied such things. Babies are not scared of heights. They're not scared of much at all. So something happens both to people who learn to love jumping from cliffs and those who will do anything to avoid heights. And yes, most of us are somewhere in the middle of those two extremes. But we could, all of us, learn to move anywhere along the spectrum in principle. But who could ever be bothered? It just isn't important to most of us to learn to enjoy cliff edges more or less, or spiders, or storms. And for people at either end who either love such things or are terrified by them, they really do not want to move. If you enjoy a thing, why turn the enjoyment into a fear by engaging in practices likely to cause fear? Perhaps by taking a massive dose of a drug like LSD to induce psychosis before approaching a cliff? These LSD psychoses can sometimes end up changing a person for life. And if one is really afraid of heights, unless it is causing day-to-day problems, why would that person want to go base jumping when the world has so many other fun things to offer? Some people with literally debilitating fear of heights will try to get over it by extreme methods of gradual exposure. In any case, so it is with sexuality. All of those strange and bizarre sexualities we have been told over the last decade exist. I have little doubt many people do honestly have, although admittedly, for many people who make their life about this, rather many of those seem to be simply seeking attention because they're yet to find some other pursuit, interest, hobby, or obsession to capture their attention and cause them to be interesting to others. And all of us could change to be like them, or they like us. We could all, in principle, end up anywhere on the spectrum of sexuality. But most of us will never try, and many will claim they never could change their sexuality. They just cannot imagine it. But I repeat myself. The idea, however, that sexuality is fixed and one is born that way is a core tenet of what has come to be known as woke, in particular, the woke left. Chapter 14. The woke left and the woke right. Woke is little more than a term used to describe the latest version of postmodernism or relativism that has arisen, amongst a few other doctrines that they tend to hold. In other words, it describes a set of doctrines that together are a rejection of truth, reality, or the objective good, call it what you like. Woke, like its ancestral movements, rejects the notion that there is an objective truth, most especially in morality, but also more broadly in science and reason. Woke movements on the left tend to be highly culturally relative, and so will denigrate Enlightenment values, or even arguing a case as being nothing but the parochial products of a white colonial patriarchy. And for this reason, because those things are no better than other manifestly evil movements like fascism, can be rejected on that basis alone. Woke is where criticism turns not merely inward, but gets sucked into a singularity. Criticism for criticism's sake, where everything is regarded as evil, including all methods of criticism, are rejected. Yes, there is a strict logical contradiction there, but that is the point. Even logic is rejected by the committed postmodernist or proponent of modern woke. The woke left tends to see the world in terms of not objective truth or good explanations, therefore, but rather as a set of narratives, and everyone is entitled to their own narrative about how the world works, and none is objectively better than the other. Nonetheless, the woke proponent will simultaneously tend always in the direction of explaining almost any phenomena, especially social and economic phenomena, as a consequence of social hierarchies and power structures, which are all said to be arbitrary, which is to say, not a consequence of anything objectively true, like, for example, competence. So a wealthy person is never wealthy because they objectively create more value. They are more competent in creating wealth, but rather on the woke account, a consequence of cultural inequalities due to entrenched racism. Therefore, the reason African Americans tend to have a lower average income compared to Asian Americans is almost entirely due to oppression and systematic racism. That is their narrative, they argue, and they also simultaneously argue, therefore just as good as any other narrative, not objectively better, which should be self-refuting. The woke right shares this rejection of objective truth and embraces explanations in terms of racism, but comes down on the side of blaming in general non-native communities or non-white communities for almost all social ills. Therefore, on their account, the reason there is a vast number of low-income white males unable to climb the social and economic hierarchy is, again, due to oppression and systematic racism. What an understanding of universality adds to this is that the woke left and right share an implicit rejection of universality. They both think in terms of determinism, usually genetic determinism, and relativism simultaneously. Again, that these two notions contradict each other is no problem for the committed relativist. On the right, it is said that one is determined in the woke world to be of a certain race and ethnicity. They believe in blood and soil, as they call it, echoing Nazi propaganda from the last century. What blood and soil means is that certain people born, the blood, in a particular place, the soil, literally belong to each other. That is to say, one supposed racial identity is inextricably linked to, and not separable from, the land they inhabit and cultivate. Of course, universality teaches us that a universal explainer can change literally any environment anywhere in the universe given the right knowledge and wealth, and therefore a person is tied not to a parochial patch of land on planet Earth, but rather their home is, quite literally, the universe. We are just yet to exploit almost any of it. The woke, on either side, are at the same time relativist about values. Values are arbitrary, and morality is arbitrary to them. What matters is nationhood and race. So they tend to defend, for example, America first, or England first, or Australia first, and so on. But they also go one step further. America first and last. Other nations should defend themselves without American help. But the truth is, all people of the West should want to defend their shared values, the values of the Enlightenment. The values the people of the woke left and right brigades deny exist objectively and can come to be known objectively by anyone. It is the Enlightenment we should want to defend first and foremost. Whatever the case, America first, like Australia first, or whatever country, is inherently collectivist. Should it not be individual first, or family first, Enlightenment first? No doubt, America, England, Israel, Australia, Canada, Japan, or name your nation worth defending will be on the list somewhere. But first, there should be many reasons why, or situations we can imagine, where we should not want to defend our nation first. For example, if the nation itself comes for us or our families. As I argue, what it should be about is shared Enlightenment values. And insofar as an American should want to defend the nation of the United States of America before any other nation, as they should, one value of an enlightened nation not mentioned so far is friendship. Americans should want to defend Americans, but Australians and the British and Israelis should want to defend Americans too, as indeed they have throughout history, and vice versa. Happily, explanatory universality teaches us that the woke left and the woke right, like the racists and the Marxists and the Islamists and the relativists and so on, can all learn better. They are not destined to remain in ignorance of our best ideas. Their minds are like ours in being able to comprehend anything that can be understood, including, especially, our best ideas about how to have even better ideas. That some people are literally beyond redemption is the myth of the framework, as Popper would put it. The myth that there is no talking to some people. Sure, it may be difficult, and in some cases not worth your time and energy trying, but no one is ultimately irredeemable. Although sometimes time is a factor and you're going to have to kill that person before they kill you. That's a separate issue. We can be optimistic about the woke, the Islamists, the Marxists, and other dogmatists, and our societies, and we ourselves as individuals. We can all come to understand the world better. And in doing so, our societies will converge on objective moral truths more and more, and diverse cultures that embrace Western values will converge with each other. Chapter 15. Universality and Optimism. As members of cultures that understand the importance of the values of the West and the teachings of the Enlightenment, we should appreciate that given the universality of our minds, we can always think of something even better than the way our societies are arranged right now. We can always understand anything that at the moment we think of as a problem, and in finding solutions, we make progress. We are, all of us, the same in our capacity to explain the world, but we will choose different things to focus on, and some of us may be more or less encumbered by either what we objectively know about the world or what we know but is not so, and what irrationalities or even anti-rationalities plague our minds. All of that, the good and the bad, make us not merely unique in how we think, but how we go about approaching the world and the problems we encounter. And just as well, because there is an infinite amount of ignorance out there about the world, and always will be. We'll never run out of things to do or problems to solve. Racism makes no sense given explanatory universality, because every human mind can learn whatever any other human mind can. Race essentialism makes no sense, because what we should value as Americans, Australians, Koreans, Englishmen, Dutchmen, or whatever else are the values that unite us as a culture. Our cultures are worth preserving because they contain values, which is to say, they are valuable. And a major part of what makes them valuable is that the most fundamental values all of the Western world shares for speech, trade, and democracy allow for ever more value to be created. And ever more value being created means ever more wealth created. And with more wealth, more problems can be solved, and knowledge created at a rate faster than ever before. It is the only thing that will save us from extinction and distinguish us from everything else in the universe. Our resilience, our ability to keep our best ideas in existence for long enough that they evolve into something better. And just perhaps, ultimately one day, ideas that will allow ourselves to remain in existence for as long as we desire to. Any individual, depressed or confused, angry or overwhelmed, should be able to pause and reflect if they understand the capacity of their mind to do anything, to think of something better that will give rise to more positive emotions and a better frame of mind from where to begin the process of conjecturing solutions to pressing problems. Yes, this is sometimes, perhaps often, far easier said than done. But an understanding that it is possible for improvement to happen anywhere, anytime, can be liberating and quite informative for many. All life is problem solving, and continuously solving one's problems leads to a state of ever greater happiness and contentment, but never an unproblematic state. Understanding improvement is possible can solve a vast array of problems that seem to plague many that I have listed here over these hours of this series during which I've spoken about this. It is the cure for thinking you cannot do the thing you really want to do and never will be able to. It is the cure for thinking you or someone else is inherently too stupid or of too low an IQ to ever appreciate a particular thing. It is the cure for sexism, racism, and all forms of bigotry. It is the cure to thinking all children must be forced to engage in certain lessons if they're ever going to learn what society needs them to learn. It is the cure for thinking only medication can possibly fix mental illness, or is always the best way to treat it, or that only certain ethnicities will ever fit into certain nations, while it explains exactly why a carefully crafted immigration policy for a nation is needed in a world where people hold to hostile ideas. And it can be the cure for the pessimistic Western series of pessimisms on all fronts around people and the cosmos, so-called existential risk, or X-risk as it is fashionably called. Is the next global pandemic going to involve a virus or other pathogen we cannot possibly solve before vast numbers, perhaps some large portion of the global population, are infected and killed? Perhaps a supervolcano will erupt somewhere, blotting out the sun for years at a time, destroying most farm crops worldwide. Or perhaps a collision with an asteroid will do the same. A solar flare could destroy all global electrical and communications infrastructure and precipitate a war and crisis. Perhaps nuclear war happens. Perhaps a strain of socialism and postmodernism, worse than woke, spreads via the successor of TikTok, and democratic governments everywhere are toppled in a global communist revolution, and humankind is returned to tribal thinking and agricultural work. Drought and darkness, locusts and pestilence, frogs, flies and floods, just to name a few of the biblical plagues that authors thousands of years ago imagined were the worst possible things that might happen. Today we can imagine more modern maladies such as wandering black holes or bioengineered weapons or computer viruses disabling global financial markets, electricity outages for months or years at a time, supernovae blasts, and on for all the things we've learned about. We can imagine those things because they're well within the repertoire of our good explanations. We've already encountered those ideas at some point in time, and so for all of those things, we have a head start of sorts. We can mitigate many by simply understanding them more deeply and taking some precautions. We should embrace what we are as problem solvers. It's what we do. We create knowledge and solve our problems. Many of us find it fun to work through the solutions to many of those existential risks. Some people earn a living writing books and conducting interviews about them. Even pessimists here have their place. But it is the duty of the optimists in technology and elsewhere, the engineers and captains of industry, business makers, to generate wealth faster. Because wealth, defined as David Deutsch did, as the repertoire of physical transformations we are capable of causing, is the limiting factor, alongside explanatory knowledge itself, in our being able to find the resources and construct the widgets to turn those problems into new solutions through technology. But, and this is absolutely key, no amount of technology we produce today will in general prepare us for the problems we cannot add yet to our list of X-risk dangers because of the simple fact that 1. They've never been encountered before, and 2. They've never even been imagined yet. What sort of thing am I thinking about? Well, I cannot say by definition apart from arguing by analogy, but it must be the equivalent of something like a person from the Middle Ages, around the year 1200 or so, trying to think of how a supernova might affect the atmosphere of the Earth. No person then had a clue of what the atmosphere really consisted of, let alone what a star truly was, let alone what an exploding star might do to something like the atmosphere of the Earth. Nor could such a person imagine nuclear war. Not only did they not know about nuclear weapons, they could not possibly imagine nuclear weapons. They didn't know about nuclei. They may have seen a volcanic eruption, at best perhaps, but they couldn't dream that mere mortal men sitting in a room somewhere and pressing buttons could literally guide a missile almost anywhere on Earth that caused a similar level of destruction compared to that of a volcano. How could mere people control that sort of power without even going outside? That seemed like something only a literal god would be able to do. To those people, therefore, we would seem like gods. And presumably, in another 200 or 2,000 years, our descendants will stand in relation to us as far-reaching and amazing in their power and knowledge and wealth as we did compared to the denizens of the Middle Ages. What power might our descendants wield? We cannot imagine now, but they will be prepared for problems we certainly cannot even think of right now. To ensure they are, we need ever more rapid knowledge and wealth creation. Without that, without rapid progress and problem solving everywhere, we will be overtaken at some point by something we've not imagined, or not imagined in time. We need to create faster. Happily, we may now be on the precipice of creating just the right tools just in time to help us. If we remain optimistic, that may indeed be the limiting factor at the moment. Not knowledge, not resources, and not wealth, but a stance on what to do with the most important entity in the universe, minds and the ideas they have. Those need to be unleashed, not shackled. And yet, right now, we are at a crossroads, as we always are. Do we take hold of the opportunity to augment our thinking and knowledge creation, or do we slow down and regulate ourselves into oblivion. Chapter 16. Universality and Artificial Intelligences. Understanding personhood, truly, deeply understanding it, to the level it is understood presently, is a cure today for confusion and hence pessimism around AI, AGI, and so-called ASI, or artificial superintelligence. Here, I will just point the viewer and listener to my other recent and equally lengthy series on that topic, the AI 2027 paper, and my Doom Debates appearance, and my Ratfest talk, AI and the Philosophy of Science. I do not wish to rehash all of those arguments now. An overview will suffice. Artificial intelligence is a technology and hence a tool we should want to harness. It offers us an opportunity to literally augment the speed at which we think and the amount that we can remember. We can outsource rather much mundane work today to everything from the electronic calculator when arithmetic problems are complex, through to searching the world's libraries of information with LLMs. 100 years ago, mathematical drudgery that would have taken the best human calculators many days to do can be accomplished in seconds. A human being, therefore, with a pocket calculator or a smartphone or whatever, is literally superhuman for arithmetic when compared to someone from 1920. As Einstein is reported to have said, but this may be apocryphal, "My pencil and I are cleverer than I." Whatever the origins of that quote, it's true. Mere pencil and paper allow a human to recall more than a mind without external memory. And a calculator speeds up the rate at which one can perform all manner of mathematical drudgery. Today, desktop and laptop computers supercharge all that, and the internet and LLMs, well, I'm running out of superlatives to describe just what a human being in possession of a smart device with a 5G connection to ChatGPT or Grok or name your large language model can accomplish. Sure, this external add-on to the human brain that is the smartphone isn't quite what people think of when they think of cybernetic science fiction style upgrades to humanoids, but it's getting there. Why not look on this relationship, humans plus computer plus internet connection plus large language model, with excitement and optimism? The tiger has claws, the bird has wings, the fish has fins, and we, people, have minds and smartphones. The smartphone and other technology in general, in addition to our universal minds, is what gives us an advantage in evolutionary terms when pitted against the cosmos. We should want to take advantage of this survival mechanism that has arisen. We should want to lean into that which boosts the performance of the very thing nature gifted us first, our capacity to think. If we can use our capacity to think, a feature of our minds granted by natural and perhaps sexual selection, to upgrade ourselves with technology, then we would be idiotic not to. A human plus AI is a superhuman of a kind, or at least super as compared to any human lacking the upgrade. Pessimistic psychologists, parents, teachers, and others bemoan the fact children, and strangely even themselves, are attached to their phones. Attached, as if that's now pejorative. We have fingers waved at us. You cannot live without your phone. Or how often are children scolded? Put the phone away, and so on. But in the modern day, stop being so attached to your phone is rather like telling a person in the 1800s not to be so attached to their shoes. Yes, sure, sometimes taking off one's shoes can be a good thing, and sometimes putting down the phone is good too. But overall, in the grand scheme of things, accusing someone of being attached to their shoes or to their pants is a ludicrous accusation. And it is generally a ludicrous accusation when applied to phones or other technology today. Yes, of course, no one wants to be in a conversation with someone who is simply ignoring them for something apparently more interesting on their screen. But that is a matter of individual courtesy and cultural norms people should learn to navigate. If you ignore someone you care about in person by staring at a screen while they're telling you a story, that's a criticism of you and your ideas, not the screen. That would be rather like blaming shoes if some vandal decided to trample a rose garden. Well, if we didn't have shoes, no one would trample a rose garden because the thorns would have stuck right in the soles of their feet. Those shoes be damned. That's absurd. In any case, I do not need to explain to you, dear listener, all of the pessimistic attitudes around modern technology. You hear that elsewhere. My appeal is to think of yourself as already superhuman and becoming ever more super as time goes on. For one thing, because considered as an abstract technology, your mind contains good explanations, knowledge and other ideas that make you like some Greek demigod as compared to our ancestors. Simply knowing you should wash your hands after using the bathroom and before eating puts you millennia ahead of most humans that have ever walked the earth, and therefore exponentially less likely to get an infection or other sickness. Putting a modern smartphone in your hand that you are adept at using makes you basically a fully fledged Greek god. Never mind the demi part. The trident in the hands of Poseidon had a power of far less potency than a modern phone in the hands of a person. But, and this is important to remember, the phone, like an LLM, is dumb AI. We are a general intelligence, and should we program an artificial general intelligence, it will be able to use AI as well. And whatever technology, and however much technology it, the AGI, uses, so too will we be able to, in lockstep with it, just as we collaborate with other humans. If AGI is one day figured out and programmed, we will collaborate with it, because what it and we share is universality, basically by definition of what a person is. We will all be people in the same way with problems and peculiar interests. But what about the concerns around ASI, artificial superintelligence? What about the danger it poses, the thing that can outthink us? But recall, AGI would already be a system with the capacity for explanatory universality, again, by definition. And there is no being more universal than universal. Therefore, there is no such thing as superintelligence. There can only be AGI, or a person, augmented with regular dumb AI. Once a system can understand anything that can be understood, where that anything is any physical process, anywhere in physical reality, there is nothing more than that. Superintelligence, or ASI, of the form qualitatively different from us, as we are qualitatively different to regular AI, is an appeal to the supernatural. Literally. Because by that metric, or definition, or explanation, call it what you like, arguing that some system is more universal than universal is literally irrational. A violation not merely of the laws of physics, but logic itself. There can be no such system. But if one thinks, but what about an AGI that thinks that much faster than a human? Again, we must say, that's just like any regular human with a smartphone as compared to that denizen of the Middle Ages. AGI is the pinnacle of mental technology, if you like, because people are the apex of the intelligence hierarchy, and there's nothing beyond. Insofar as other animals have anything resembling intelligence, it is a form of non-explanatory intelligence that does not matter much to the universe on a cosmic scale, because it cannot change things on a cosmic scale. It can barely change things on a local scale. But we can, because we are universal explainers and wealth creators. All other forms of so-called AI are nothing but tools, calculators, that do our bidding or respond to our prompts. They're not creative because they have no interests. They have no problems. We give them the tasks to complete, which incidentally is how we treat school children. We give them tasks, which is absurd. We treat them as we treat mindless AI. With a chatbot, that's all well and good because we are outsourcing the boring part of a thing we want to do, which can in general be automated. We are general intelligences, people, and so we should want to merge with the AI by using it just as many of us merge with spectacles, as I have, or pocket calculators if we're mathematicians. We already are part cyborg. We will never exceed a general capacity for explanation because there is nothing beyond except for being able to accomplish what we wish to more quickly. And regular AI and universal computers help us do exactly that. Alien intelligence, if it's out there and evolved millions of years ago, may well be like that too. Like us, they will be able to also explain anything that can be explained, which is literally anything in the physical universe. But we should expect that they can do it faster and create faster and generate wealth faster because their tools, and especially their AI, will be that much better. By aliens, I mean aliens that might visit us. If they can travel across the galaxy, they're clearly going to be a long way ahead of us. Think millions of years. The question then is, if they are so much faster, why haven't they already spread throughout the universe? Of course, that's a topic for another time, but a fascinating one for any universal explainer to ponder. Are there other universal explainers in this universe beyond our solar system? Perhaps more fascinating than that is the thought that we are rapidly becoming the superintelligent alien species now. We are creating the technology that gives us escape velocity, not merely from this planet, but from the solar system to the stars. We may be the only universal intelligences in the universe, or we may be the first. Whatever the case, if we wish to persist, we must make progress faster everywhere and not slow down. Chapter 17. Universality, freedom of speech, and freedom of reach. Making progress of any kind requires us to have new ideas. A way to help create new ideas faster is to collaborate. Other people can be fascinating and inspiring and say the thing that gives us the clue to solve our problem. None of us can be an island completely. Friends, family and colleagues and the relationships we have with them are among the most rewarding parts of life. If all life is problem solving, other people are the source of and solution to rather many of those problems. But to collaborate with others, as we must, especially on some of those X-risk issues many are so consumed with, and especially to collaborate at scale, we need systems in place that allow us to share knowledge and other information rapidly and efficiently. Modern technology like the information superhighway allows that. Optic fibre, radio and satellite allow individuals separated by tens of thousands of kilometres to collaborate today as if they were in the same room together. Again, this is beyond what ancient Greeks could even have dreamed their gods might have been capable of. But here we are. Today, technology is not a limiting factor to how fast we can communicate, and with who about what. The limiting factor, rather, is sometimes the law and culture. You may well be able to talk to someone on the other side of the planet, and yet today, in the 2020s, we are at a peculiar time where if, say, you raise certain sensitive political issues with your friend on another continent, the local constabulary in your own town may turn up at your door and arrest you for the offence of causing offence, not necessarily to anyone in actuality, but only potentially. Here, I'm thinking of instances, especially in the United Kingdom and my own country of Australia, where for the crime of posting this or that thought on social media, the crime or non-crime hate incident causes people, backed by the power of the state, to prevent you from continuing to communicate. Whatever it is you were trying to say or solve is interrupted, not by a satellite outage or accidental cutting of a seafloor optic fibre cable, but rather the sensitivities of a police officer somewhere in some station. This is an absurdity we are living through, and this sort of censorship is an attempt to curtail individual liberty through a shackling of universality. It is a kind of anti-rational meme that has spread through some Western nations. I need not consider at length the same kind of memes that have captured non-Western nations. Those are better known. For example, the almost total censorship in North Korea that hobbles progress in that society, or the heavy censorship of any of 100 other nations like China, Russia, Turkmenistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and so on. The West has been a place where we break free of those restraints and have been able to say almost anything short of a call to violence. But today, saying you disagree with certain political policies or cultural practices can lead to a knock at the door in some places from the authorities. And even in places that are a beacon of political freedom, like the United States of America, the knock at the door might never come from a man in uniform with a gun wielding state power, but may come from your neighbours who violently disagree with what you say. These issues of speech, curtailed by state forces or the heckler's veto or something more violent, are cultural problems, and they are pressing problems precisely because we cannot predict ahead of time where tomorrow's solutions might come from. So any amount of censorship or chilling of speech today can indeed slow progress. It causes people not merely not to say things, but in the long run, not to think certain things, for fear they fall afoul of social norms as much as the law. No one wants to be ostracised. This is to say, we have entered a time of intolerance. But we should have maximum tolerance for all ideas except those that breed intolerance, the worst kind of which is, of course, that which calls for violence. Everything else, as far as possible, should be permissible, even if grotesquely false or stupid and so on. Rather much of what seemed stupid in the past is common sense today. Consider, for example, that in the distant past it was considered literally foolish to criticise the king or even other members of the nobility, which is to say, only a fool could or would do it. Even then, sometimes the court jester lost their life if they went too far. One famous example of this was Trobellet, jester to Francis I, who once insulted a noble so badly that the king condemned him to death, but allowed him to choose how he would die. Trobellet cleverly replied, "By old age," which amused the king enough to pardon him. Today, it's considered foolish to hold the stance that the king, nobility, or other leaders are actually above criticism. So we can see what is stupid today can be wisdom tomorrow. The lesson is clear. Nothing should be censored in that way. Again, besides the caveat of calling for violence, that is what freedom of speech is about. But it has been said that although freedom of speech is a virtue, no one should expect to be given any particular platform. There is no freedom of reach. There may be no right to use someone else's platform. For example, should Mark Zuckerberg or the owners of Facebook not want to platform you, they need not. Facebook is the virtual equivalent of a hotel lobby. You have no right whatsoever to stand on a soapbox in a hotel lobby and speak uninterrupted. You do not own that space, and you do not own Facebook or X or any other platform. But that is not what freedom of reach means. Freedom of reach means no one can stop you from making your own platform using the technology you can by all rights claim or purchase, or better yet build in order to broadcast whatever message you like. But no one needs to help you in this. That is their liberty to choose or choose not to assist you in granting you more reach. But potentially, because of the universality of each of us, you and the rest of us do have infinite reach, potentially, and we should be able to explore however much of that reach we like. Chapter 18. Summary and conclusions. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. So goes the beginning of the second sentence of the Declaration of Independence of the United States, as written by Thomas Jefferson, with help from Benjamin Franklin. It is true men were created equal, but not by any supernatural being, but rather the incremental outworkings of evolution through natural selection. And it is true they were created equal. But that is not self-evident, as it says there. Indeed, it is a truth that many of the finest intellectuals find ways to quarrel with. Perhaps our genes are not the same, so we're not equal. Perhaps the families from which we come are not equally wealthy, so we cannot possibly begin equally. It may be true in some abstract sense, but people may argue that's not what equality here means. It means equality before the law. But again, the intellectual will come back and say, well, in some abstract sense, we may be equal before the law. However, quality legal representation can be among the most costly services anyone might ever run the risk of needing to pay for. Therefore, the wealthy have an advantage over the poor. It may be true that justice is blind in theory, but in a world of wokeism or institutional racism, judges do see colour or grant people lighter sentences if they're mentally ill and so on. But scientifically and philosophically, the truth is, people are each created equally. One way to put this is that we are all equal in our infinite ignorance, as Karl Popper has said, and I have quoted frequently. All of us, no matter how much we learn of this or that narrow area, can never possibly learn everything about everything because any one thing in the universe is always infinitely complex. There's always more to learn about it. We will never reach the end of our quest to uncover the nature of reality, and so we are all of us equally far from ever obtaining a complete picture of reality, of having all questions answered, or even of being able to ask all possible questions. We are all equal in our infinite ignorance, but we are also equal each in our capacity to actually ask questions and seek answers. We each possess the most powerful form of universality so far uncovered in this universe, explanatory universality. We are all equal in our explanatory universality. Some of us might think a little more quickly, but as technology continues to fall in price precipitously, as it becomes ubiquitous, each of us can purchase smartphones and other computers to effectively calculate and simulate more, ever more quickly. The playing field is very much levelled in that regard by technology. We should expect that to continue apace. Already, brain implants have been developed to help treat deafness and blindness and other congenital defects or accidents that may occur. As we learn more, healthy people might decide to have implants to augment the speed of their thinking or the amount they can store in short and long-term memory. That may be years, decades or centuries away, but the point is, because our brains are computational devices of a kind, made of regular matter, organised in a special way, we can learn to design and improve it, just as we have learned to design and reshape the environment outside of our skulls. We will merge with our technology over time. It has already begun, with spectacles and hearing aids and hip replacements and artificial limbs and more besides. This is not something to fear, but to welcome. We want more robust bodies. No implant will ever grant us the ability to think of a wider array of things because we already have the capacity for a complete 360-degree view, or better yet, 4 pi steradians approach to the world, or if you want a less mathematical analogy. We have already been granted the complete spectrum of potential when it comes to solutions we can find. If it happens in the physical world, it is computable and it is explicable, and by us because of our special relationship to the laws of physics. The laws of physics mandate their own computability and comprehensibility. The only alternative are phenomena literally beyond the capacity of a universal explainer to understand, and that by definition is an appeal to the supernatural. It's just another term for God. But if we are willing to remain rational, the conclusion is clear. We can understand the universe. Never completely, but more and more accurately over time. This grants us power over it to turn otherwise inert matter into resources, wealth, and technology. All of us can in principle do this, no matter our supposed race, gender, sexuality, or ethnicity. None of those categories have any effect whatsoever upon our minds because, again, they are universal, and that quality cannot be affected by the genes to turn it up or down. There is no turning up or down universality. It simply is. We have explored throughout this piece the idea that because of universality, we should expect each of us to approach the world in a highly unique way and have problems whose solutions demand we create different knowledge, or in other words, learn different things. This makes a mockery of the entire system of education we have. That system is based around the primitive notion that every human needs to be made the same in certain ways, gain the same knowledge of literature, science, mathematics, and so on. But why? The only reason seems to be so that they can be examined on it, ranked, and then judged for their grades. After all, if the material taught in school was there to actually be learned by everyone, there would be no need to grade people on it. Anyone who didn't learn it all would be seen to have failed if that was truly the philosophy driving modern education. But it's not. Universality teaches us that the reason people perform better or worse in school and at university and so on, in exams and projects, is that they have different levels of curiosity about or interest in those subjects. Likewise, universality completely refutes the idea that IQ, the intelligence quotient, is anything to do fundamentally with the capacity of the human brain or its mind to either understand or learn anything. All that IQ tests can possibly assess is the extent to which this or that bit of knowledge has been learned before taking the test. Whether or not the knowledge has yet appeared in memory, because any knowledge that can be learned by anyone else, whether IQ-style mathematical puzzles or puzzles involving language and how to solve them. And that knowledge includes cultural knowledge as well. Anyone can learn to adopt the culture of anyone else. So in principle, no matter where anyone is from, they can, in principle, immigrate to anywhere else and fit in. Again, in principle. In practice, the universal mind will access a memory that in many cases already contains deeply entrenched ideas about how to behave. In computational terms, this must have something to do with how resistant some ideas are to changing, or how resistant some memories are to be written over or deleted and so on. This is a reality of immigration. Although minds in principle can adopt any idea, in practice they will not, because other ideas already present in the mind can switch off a person's critical faculties, their ability to learn. Therefore, and again referring to our uniqueness as people as being different one from another, some people will be hostile to Western civilization. Those people should not be welcomed into Western nations until they can demonstrate they are not a danger to the people already present there. This is an increasing concern across the world for many communities who feel many who cross their national borders do not share their values. Those concerns are legitimate ones in a world dominated by some dangerous ideologies, both political, like communism, socialism and environmentalism, and religious, most notably conservative and extreme versions of Islam, which are hostile to not merely the practitioners of every other religion, but even to an entire gender. It is a peculiarity of our time that many in the West are obsessed by the idea we human beings can change our sex, but we cannot, for that is a biological category underpinning the explanation of how it is that the species persists through time, just as it explains how literally every other sexually reproducing species exists. Males produce sperm, females produce ova, and mating between them produce offspring. But the way that sex is expressed in human beings is sometimes called gender, and is a property of the choices human minds make about how they will behave in society. Some biological men, in particular, go to great lengths to appear for all the world like biological women of their culture, and in rarer cases vice versa. This is barely ever an issue in society because such people are said to pass, which is to say they are so well disguised no one knows that person seemingly with breasts and a very feminine voice and face is actually in possession of XY chromosomes in every one of their cells. However, it has become the case also that sometimes some men, it's usually men, go to zero effort whatever to disguise the fact that they are indeed men, but then demand of the rest of society that they should be treated as a woman and should be allowed in the women's restroom and to perform in women's weightlifting competitions and be called ma'am and not sir. But as I say, if those people have gone to zero effort whatsoever to change their gender or their outward expression of gender, why should the rest of us go to any effort whatsoever to acknowledge their preference? This eruption of irrationality and demand that everyone else bend to their peculiar idiosyncratic desires may simply be a product of the late 20-teens and 2020s and may well be over soon as we enter an era of common sense on the gender front, where people can, without being discriminated against, identify however they like, without the expectation of, again, being discriminated, but also without the expectation that society grant them special privileges only afforded to those people who either are, or at least for all the world appear as, a particular sex. As for gender, so too for sexuality. A body, a brain, a genome may have a sex, but a mind cannot, for it is abstract, not physical. A mind cannot have a race or an ethnicity for the same reason, but it can have a culture, the set of memes it has adopted. And a mind will have a sexuality, preferences with respect to sex, just as it can have preferences with respect to food or art and so on. Minds do not begin as blank slates. We are born with certain ideas. However, as ideas, universality means they can in principle be forgotten or written over and changed. In principle, this is always possible, even in extreme cases such as when a mind is plagued by mental illness. However, sometimes the source of mental illness is not purely a matter of software, but the hardware that is the brain. In those cases, many people are assisted by altering the hardware with medications, but ultimately the decision to use a medication is itself an idea. The solution is always an idea, even if the idea is, intervene with this pill, it will make you feel better. Understanding the universality of the human mind teaches us all of that, giving us a vision of our fellow earthlings as being among the first general purpose intelligences in the universe. There may be aliens out there among the stars, and there may be AGI in our future. But the difference between us and existing AI and other animals is a black and white one. We have problems, and we can find the solutions to those problems by explaining the world, while those other systems, whether biological animals or AI based in silicon, cannot. Not yet. And there is no ASI, no superintelligence coming to threaten us any more than there are demons going to attack us. Those are simply appeals to the supernatural, beliefs based in the notion that the laws of physics can be broken. The farthest reaches stretch to the ends of reality, both physical and abstract. We can understand all possible things, from the smallest fundamental particles moving in any which way to superclusters of galaxies and how the entire cosmos behaves over time. That we have managed to understand so much of the literally unseen world at the smallest scales and the largest should have been a deep clue to anyone interested in the nature of personhood. It is a truly amazing fact. We have understood both quarks and quasars, and lots in between. How can that possibly be if all our minds are capable of doing was what those minds had supposedly evolved to do on the African savannah? And that, as Richard Dawkins is fond of saying, is to understand so-called middle world. Is it true that some things really are queerer than we can suppose?
In your TED Talk, you talked about this idea of queerer than you can suppose. And I find this, I've been thinking through this. Can you please explain that?
Yes. It's a quotation from J.B.S. Haldane, who is a great, or was a great British biologist, geneticist, biochemist, and philosopher. And he said something like this: "Now, my suspicion is that the universe is not only queerer than we suppose, but queerer than we can suppose." And queer in this sense means strange. It doesn't mean what you might think it means. I adopted that phrase, queerer than we can suppose, to describe what I feel about certain aspects of science. And I suppose quantum theory is the obvious one, but actually even ordinary common sense science can sometimes feel very queer. Lewis Wolpert had a nice illustration. He said, every time you drink a glass of water or a cup of tea or beer, whatever it is, that probability is high that you are imbibing at least one molecule that passed through the bladder of Julius Caesar. And it's a probability argument. The number of molecules in a glass of water compared to the number of glasses of water there are in the entire world is such that the probability is that any particular molecule of water you will meet twice, or you will encounter it again. Well, that's not deeply mysterious in the way that quantum theory is mysterious, but it's very surprising. Another example that Wolpert uses is if you shoot a rifle horizontally and at the same moment drop a bullet from the muzzle of the rifle, they'll hit the ground at the same time. I mean, I can't do the physics, but these kinds of things, that's just queerer than we suppose, queerer than we can suppose. I suppose might mean the interpretations of quantum theory.
Okay. So you had a podcast with skeptic Michael Shermer, who's a mutual friend of ours, and I defended this idea of queerer than you can suppose. And the Australian philosopher and science educator puts out this really good demolition, 3-hour demolition of that idea. And I'm going to try to reduce that argument, and you tell me.
Well, I'm not familiar with it, so you'll have to do a good job.
Okay, I'm going to try. If I'm unclear, let me know. So the idea is basically nothing can be, for human minds, nothing can be queerer than we can suppose. And so if the idea is that our ancestors evolved to throw spears and kill gazelles on the savannah, those who were unsuccessful at that died off and didn't get to reproduce, and those who were successful at that got to reproduce. And over successive generations, one thing that happened was, I think you call it middle world in your TED Talk. We understand really well the middle world.
Okay, middle world is the world between the very large
Correct.
relativity and the very small
Quantum.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so we didn't evolve. It conferred no evolutionary advantage on us to understand what happens inside of black holes.
No.
Just as it conferred no evolutionary advantage upon us to understand double slit experiments or in the quantum. And so Brett Hall, getting this, who's a colleague of your colleague, David Deutsch, the physicist at Oxford, said that nothing is queerer than we can suppose because we can model everything. So, for example, we didn't evolve to understand UV light, or we didn't evolve to understand the evolution of the planets. But we do understand the evolution of the planets. We do understand electromagnetism.
Well,
that's one of the criticisms.
But that's just a statement. I mean, it's true that we understand the solar system and we understand electromagnetic. Well, I don't, but I mean,
right.
But don't forget, I mean, there was a time when people couldn't believe that anybody could live in Australia because they'd fall off. It's no argument. I mean, I'm not doing justice because I haven't actually read his
beginning
argument,
of Infinity,
but to say because we already understand X, that means that we therefore must be capable of understanding Y, where Y is something. I mean, I could believe that there is some alien civilization where there are intelligent individuals who can understand things that we can't even begin to understand.
Okay, so
just as a chimpanzee can't understand Pythagoras' theorem.
So this is where it gets a little contentious. So I'm an atheist, you're an atheist, Brett and David we're all atheists. So we don't need to impose any supernatural explanation for anything. So I think Deutsch would say, and I understand this is a very bizarre criticism, bear with me, is that the saying that we can't understand the quantum realm is akin to saying that we can't understand the supernatural. It's a kind of supernaturalism.
I would call it superhumanism, meaning there may be things which are not supernatural, but superhuman in the sense that humans can't understand them, but some superhuman aliens can.
If we can model it, though, like if we know what happens inside of a nuclear blast, which is, there's no way we evolved to understand that, then we can understand our brains evolved to understand things far beyond what conferred an evolutionary advantage upon us. This is, and I've been wrestling with this for quite some time.
Yes. Well, David Deutsch believes in the many worlds interpretation of quantum theory,
Correct.
Where the many worlds interpretation, if we take the example of the hypothetical example of Schrödinger's cat, where Schrödinger proposed this as a way of ridiculing the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum theory, in which this cat is in a box. Probably you know the hypothetical example. Is in a box, and there's a killing mechanism which is triggered by a quantum event. And so the cat is shut up in the box, and you know that a quantum event might or might not have happened. So the cat might or may not be dead. According to the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum theory, the cat is neither alive nor dead until you open the box, and then suddenly it becomes either alive or dead. Well, Schrödinger proposed that as a way of ridiculing the whole idea of the Copenhagen interpretation. David Deutsch believes in the many worlds interpretation, which is that the world is constantly branching and producing new worlds, and there are many worlds in which the cat is alive and many worlds in which the cat is dead. And already in our particular world, the cat is either alive or dead, and we don't know until we open the box. But there are another millions of worlds in which the cat is alive or dead. By the way, there's a lovely cartoon in the New Yorker I saw a few years ago, which was in a veterinary surgeon's waiting room, and there were people there with their pet dogs and their lampshades on and things, and the nurse was coming out, and she was saying to one of the people sitting there, "About your cat, Mr. Schrödinger, I have some good news and some bad news." Anyway, David Deutsch believes in the many worlds interpretation, which is that the cat is alive in some worlds and dead in others. Well, now that is, at least that doesn't totally defy common sense. It does defy economy. It's a ridiculously uneconomic idea. Unparsimonious idea. But unlike the Copenhagen interpretation, it's not just horrible.
And does the fact that he can posit that, or does the fact that you can make an eloquent argument for the self as gene, does that mean that things are not queerer than we can suppose?
Well, no, because the selfish gene is relatively simple, and there are a few people who are clever enough, maybe, to understand quantum theory, but I don't know how you can be so confident that there are not other things which nobody can understand, in the same way as a dog can't understand Newton's laws.
You gave the example in your TED Talk of dogs who smell and water striders, and the consciousness of a water strider, those little bugs that just float on top of the water, of a water strider, and our consciousness, the way we've evolved, we cannot understand. So I'm thinking, is the difficulty maybe in the idea that what we mean by understand? Because I think Deutsch would say that if you can model it, you can understand it.
Yes. I'm not sure about that.
I don't know either.
David Deutsch is an incredibly clever man, and highly original, and everything he says sounds odd until you think about it further and you think how brilliant it is. And so I wouldn't like to put myself against him. I wouldn't like to have a debate with him. I'd lose.
About physics, at least.
Well, certainly about physics, yes.
Unfortunately, on this, Richard Dawkins is wrong. But he is in excellent company. Almost everyone everywhere thinks there must be things that we puny humans cannot understand, and entities that stand in relation to us as we stand in relation to those chimpanzees Richard mentioned. Most of those people are deeply religious. Some are deeply rational and have, like Richard, reasoned their way into supernatural thinking, though they will deny that with horror. But that misconception is completely cleared up by appreciating the depth of this idea that is explanatory universality. We can understand anything, but not everything in any final sense. There is no final sense because every solution we find reveals new problems to us. We will continue to find things ever smaller and ever larger than the structures we presently understand. At all scales, we will continue to uncover mysteries. And it is we who will uncover these mysteries and attempt solutions. We are not guaranteed to succeed. There are no guarantees. But at least we have a shot at success, an eternal success at that. That it is we, universal explainers, who can understand anything at any scale, may be a deep clue to the notion that a scale-independent theory might one day explain not only all of physical reality, but even the action of our own minds. Could that theory be constructor theory? No one can tell yet. The universe is vast. But a universal mind can always expand to be just as vast because there are no limits upon it except the laws of physics themselves. And those allow for any universal explainer to understand anything, any entity, and any physical process in the universe and the multiverse, and even beyond, if there is a beyond. Acknowledgements. The question of personhood has animated philosophers for millennia. Is a person that entity uniquely capable of appreciating art? Even cavemen had cave drawings after all. Or is it their capability to be moral and be concerned about not merely other members of their own tribe or species, but members of other species and even inanimate things like the nebulous environment? Or is it our ability to do mathematics and science? Whatever you think personhood was before this, those debates are over now. David Deutsch has explained that all of those attempts at solutions are simply manifestations of the deeper fundamental truth. We are universal explainers, and hence we can do any art, understand any science, and improve any morality using these minds. So thank you, David. As Karl Popper said also, we are all equal in our infinite ignorance. Naval Ravikant encouraged me to research how the transformer architecture works at a technical level. And to a large extent, I felt I succeeded only to find it seemed impossible to explain at an emergent level. LLMs emerged from what was a simple architecture. That was over 2 years ago, and since then, debates have raged about where LLMs will go. No one knows. But we seem to be in a position rather similar to the early days of quantum theory. No one imagined the multiverse yet, the actual emergent explanation for what is going on in quantum physics. I think that's where we are with our understanding of how LLMs work at the moment. Someone needs to come up with the overarching, simple, emergent theory. Peter Bokosian helped me refine my arguments around explanatory universality and has been a friendly sparring partner ever since in discussions around our differences in epistemology and technical matters associated with what a person is. And finally, my acknowledgement of viewers and listeners with their constant stream of questions on X, YouTube, and other social media channels. You're always a source of inspiration with your utterly unpredictable and unique perspectives on these things. Please keep the questions coming.